Right now, Newtown families are on Capitol Hill meeting with Nancy Pelosi to mark the 9th anniversary of the elementary school massacre that killed 20 children and 6 adults. But with the NRA's power as yet unchecked, it is unclear how many more anniversaries the Newtown parents will be forced to commemorate before Congress makes any steps towards meaningful change. Joining us now from Capitol Hill is Democratic Congressman from Tennessee's 9th District, Steve Cohen. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Nice to be with you, Alex.
Congressman, shortly after the shooting at the Navy Yard, you tweeted out a cartoon, I think, an editorial cartoon. We have it up on the screen right now. And some folks on the right, including the Blaze and the Washington Times, said you were blaming the National Rifle Association for the violence at the Navy Yard. What did you mean to communicate by that tweet and with that image?
Well, Bill Day is one of the great cartoonists and one of my friends and constituents. He's been doing a series on gun violence and how it's affected America. This was part of his series. And the truth is, the NRA has control of the process here with contributions, and more than that, just with the grip on a lot of people who are one-issue people and are very, very vitriolic in their defense of the Second Amendment. That's the most important issue to them. So I wanted to show that we have gun violence, gun culture. We need to respond to it. We'd like to get the debate going. There are going to be more killings, and we need to do something, if it's only a mental health bill. But I wanted to get Bill Day's cartoon out there in the marketplace of ideas, and I think that there definitely is a connection between the NRA and the continuing gun culture that we have that needs to be limited to protect Americans.
Congressman, what do you make of Harry Reid's almost dismissal of the idea of getting anything done, saying we just don't have the votes on Capitol Hill?
Well, it's sad, but it's part of the 60-vote problem in the Senate, and you can't get 60. And I know that this issue is such a hot issue, it would be difficult for Begich, it would be difficult for Pryor in Arkansas, and some other Democrats who are running for re-election, and the Republicans just shy away from it because, I got the vitriol on the Twitter from all these people that oppose that cartoon. They are hardcore Republicans who this means more to them. I think their guns are right there next to their Bibles. I'm not sure which they find more important to them.
Well,
Congressman David Corn from Mother Jones has a question for you.
Thanks, Congressman. That raises sort of, to my mind, the whole question we had a few years ago when Barack Obama got into a little trouble when he said that some people are clinging to their guns and their religion. And this sort of, is this a cultural matter that can't really be broken by simple politics?
Well, it's been that way for a while, and it certainly is in the Republican caucus. And these people are afraid to get primaried, which they would. And you see Lamar Alexander, who's a reasonable Republican, now has a right-wing opponent in his primary in my state. Mitch McConnell has one in Kentucky. Richard Lugar, one of the stars of the Senate, was defeated by a right-winger. So it's around, and it's difficult, and it is guns and the Bible.
But
and
Democrats, too, after '94, a lot of Democrats ran away from gun control after the '94 elections, Democrats in the House.
Well, it's a tough issue. I've been strong on it, and some Democrats have. But in certain districts, the gun lobby and the gun individuals that make guns their #1 issue can be a decisive force in an election, and people vote their guns.
Congressman, I want to ask you this, and then also open it up to our panel. Senators Mark Begich and Kelly Ayotte are introducing a mental health bill that was originally an amendment to the background checks bill that passed in the Senate. As they're introducing the mental health bill as a standalone piece of legislation, Harry Reid has said that you can't decouple the two. Where do you stand on that? Do you think that that is a good idea to at least try and get something done, or do you think that that is basically de-incentivizing anyone in Congress from passing meaningful gun safety reform?
Well, I'd like to see background checks and strong background checks, but I think if you can at least do mental health, that's important. I passed the right to carry bill in Tennessee back in the 90s. It was a reasonable bill, and mental health was part of it. The NRA doesn't want any limitations, and I think mental health is something we've seen as a problem. The NRA raises that along with video games as their answer. So if that's one of their answers, let them get on board and help us with mental health background checks. The Manchin-Toomey bill had part of that in it and talked about not having privilege for communications and allowing mental health histories to be sent through NCSI for background checks. And I think that if we can do something, and if Begich and Kelly come up with a bill, Kelly Ayotte, I'm all for it, and I'd be happy to be a sponsor.
Congressman, I'm going to open this up to our folks in New York. Sam, it's interesting to me that two of the things that Republicans are pushing for right now, better mental health services, which conveniently are included as part of Obamacare, and curbing video game violence. There is so much talk about the nanny state and knowing what, the government deciding what is good for us or what we can or cannot have out there. It is ironic to me that those two planks are actually things that probably some liberals and progressives support.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to know where this debate will end. I get the mental health push. I understand why people think video games are a concern, although the argument that they have the same video games around the world but not the same gun violence is pretty persuasive. The problem I think that we fail to recognize is that while these instances of mass homicide are horrific and they deserve a legislative response, the vast majority of gun violence in this country is not mass homicide. They are handgun shootings. And we have not really incorporated that statistic into this broader debate. I mean, we respond politically to these very graphic, awful instances, and rightfully so. But this is a much more complex matter than just that. And I just want to point out, there was a ridiculous comment from Senator Mark Kirk about why we shouldn't do anything on gun control in the wake of this. He said something to the extent of, we can't legislate after every mass shooting. We haven't legislated after any mass shooting.
Just do it once.
I know.
See how it goes.
I mean, we just haven't done anything. And so for anyone who's optimistic about gun control, and I don't think I've met anyone who's optimistic about it now, you shouldn't be. I mean, let's just the facts. We had a shooting of 20 first graders. We had a congresswoman shot in the head and nothing happened. I don't understand why anyone would think anything would happen after this. I hate to be such a cynic about it, but it's just the political reality.
Well, and I think that it was borne out by the president's sort of stance in the hours while this was unfolding, which was, we've had another mass shooting, and then he continues onward with his economic message. And I think, obviously, there are a lot of folks that say that was insensitive and ill-timed, but there's also the practical political reality. I think it's a gross sort of bastardization of democracy that such an overwhelming number of Americans support better gun safety measures, and yet Congress is very transparently beholden to the NRA and says there's nothing we can do about it.
But to be fair to democracy, representative democracy, right, this could all end if in the next election people who cared about gun safety voted out members of Congress who stood in its way. I mean, there are clear, individuals in Congress who lead the efforts to stop any gun control laws from passing. They could be voted out of office. They will be up for re-election. The expectation, and I think, like Sam, I call it a realistic perspective, not even pessimistic. I don't think they will be. But there is a very clear vehicle for the American people to make their voices heard. And if that happened, it would be like the reverse of 1994. As you guys mentioned in your interview, so much of this belief in Congress that you can't touch guns comes from the belief, and a lot of pollsters believe it is mistaken, that in 1994, a big part of the reason Republicans recaptured the House was because of the assault weapons ban. If that was reversed, if it was believed that a big part of the reason Republicans lost and some Democrats lost was because they stopped these gun safety or gun control legislation from going through, that would be the end of the NRA's power in Congress. It would be over in a day.
Yeah, and on that note, Congressman, the results in Colorado I don't think were that heartening given how the NRA mobilized its folks. There were certainly a number of, I would almost call them voter suppression efforts to keep folks in favor of gun safety reform from voting or participating in that election. I guess I ask you, you were a quarter of a mile away, I believe, from the shooting on Monday. What was the reaction in Congress as that unfolded? Was there a sense, okay, we've got to do something, this is a galvanizing moment, or was it sort of Congress people throwing their hands up in the air saying, here we go again?
It was no Newtown, and people, I think, are almost inured to it because they've seen what happened in the Senate and the votes couldn't be cobbled together. And in the House, on the Judiciary Committee, I mean, that's which I sit on, that's Murderers Row. That's Fox, Gehrig, and Ruth. And they all like their guns. In fact, there was a proposal there to have handgun permits from each state be honored by another state, even if they were less restrictive, and it overrode states' rights, which is supposed to be the 11th commandment of the Republicans. But yet guns trumped the states' rights, and they wanted to pass a federal law, which they did pass in the House, to say that all state handgun permits would be honored in another state, regardless of the fact that the other state might have more restrictive limits. So the guns, right? I think guns trump Bibles on that side of the aisle.
Wow. Congressman Steve Cohen, thanks for your time. Thanks for joining the program.
You're welcome. Nice to be with all of you. Four of my favorite people.